Today and over the weekend, two important moments in history were commemorated. This morning at 11 a.m, we stopped to remember the moment the guns fell silent on the battlefields of the Great War. It's a war we all know too well for the Anzac legend and, of course, the story of Gallipoli. But more and more of us are learning the story of the Western Front and Australia's extraordinary role in history through General John Monash and others, and the sacrifice of so many young men. Indeed, it's only since the Australian War Memorial started to digitise its service records that I realise my paternal grandfather, who I knew, of course, had signed up, but I didn't realise he joined up underage with the permission of his father, who wrote on his record, "We couldn't stop him anyway, what with his 5 brothers already overseas." Now, I didn't know that family history because his 5 brothers and my great-grandfather, like so many, didn't talk about the war when they came home. Nor my grandfather either, my maternal grandfather, who was wounded fighting in New Guinea against the Japanese in the Second World War. It wasn't discussed, but I know his wounds were deep. As I watched the Queen at the remembrance service at the Cenotaph in London overnight, she shed a tear as the crowds stood still. It's 100 years since the establishment of the 2-minute silence and the Cenotaph itself by her grandfather, George V. Indeed, she's the only world leader today who is a veteran of the Second World War, having served full-time as Princess Elizabeth with the Auxiliary Territorial Service. And over the Channel, in Germany, the people of Germany and the world commemorated 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. I remember it vividly. It was my Year 12 year. I was 18, and I had a sense that at very long last, the Second World War was finally, truly over. How sad it is then, with all of these markers in time, that Britain is even contemplating a return to the past. It is to the great shame of every MP, member of the British Labour Party and its supporters too, that Jeremy Corbyn is the party's standard bearer. As former Australian Labor MP Michael Danby wrote in The Australian last week, and I quote, "Corbyn is sinister. He's no daffy crank. He and the zeitgeist, the Labor zeitgeist he has empowered, have driven out lifelong Jewish members, marginalised the Jewish community and engendered such a climate of hate that there's an official investigation by the Equality and Human Rights Commission into Corbyn's party. What shames him forever," Danby wrote, "is the way over 5 years his party has tolerated and indeed licensed anti-Jewish bigotry, even Holocaust denial." Powerful stuff. But he's not the only one speaking out. Over the weekend, former UK Home Secretary and MP of 28 years, now peer, Lord Blunkett, accused Corbyn of a shocking lack of leadership, and he decried Corbyn when he said, "The behaviour of the hard left within the Labor Party, the anti-Semitism, the thuggery, the irrational views on security and international issues, and the lack of realisation that you have to embrace a big tent of people in order to win." Blunkett's comments came after yet another Labor candidate stood down after allegedly making an anti-Semitic remark. On the record are 150 cases of Corbyn candidates or MPs expressing the foulest anti-Semitic bile, but nothing has been done. And while support for Labor has plummeted in this weekend's most recent polling, the political worry is that in Britain's first-past-the-post voting system, the Brexit Party's strong showing is likely to put at risk some of the Conservative vote. And if Boris Johnson is denied a majority, it just might enable Corbyn to form a minority government with the support of minor parties. It's extraordinary that for a party only formed a matter of months ago, the Brexit Party is polling at least 19+% in some constituencies. On Saturday, a rabbi from Maidenhead in southeast England published a damning opinion piece in the London newspapers declaring that he believes it's now incumbent on all Jewish leaders to speak out against the election of Labor. Such is the threat of Jeremy Corbyn to Britain's Jews. Rabbi Jonathan Romaine wrote, "I've never written an article like this before. In the past, I, along with other clergy of all faiths have avoided being party political. We may have tackled issues such as poverty and homelessness, but we've never been in the business of taking sides. But this week, he said, I could no longer keep silent. And about time. He's been joined by others. 2 senior rabbis have also spoken out, while Britain's leading Jewish newspaper, the Jewish Chronicle, bravely published a front-page editorial urging voters to turn away from Labor. Rabbi Romain went on. I do not exaggerate when I say that in my congregation, elderly worshippers are questioning why they bothered to fight against Hitler, only for the country they were defending to one day be governed by people, some of whom, while definitely not Nazis, allow anti-Semitism to fester at the heart of their party. It dismays me that at a time when we still have with us people living in our community here and overseas who have a living memory of the Holocaust, that we are now facing these challenges. But of course, as you know, it's not just Britain. Here in Australia, it is an article of faith for many Greens politicians and their supporters to take a stand against Israel with their open campaign of smear and misinformation. In the New South Wales Labor Party, the once strong position of support for Israel has been significantly eroded. And until the coalition pushed hard for positions of positive support, not neutrality, in UN votes, you could be forgiven for thinking that the forces inside our public service were running their own anti-Israel agenda too. Over the weekend, I wrote about Holocaust teaching in our national curriculum. In my column on Sunday, I was gobsmacked earlier in the week to read that the Holocaust is now only scheduled for study in Year 10, and even then, it's not mandatory. Only one state mandates it, New South Wales, in Years 10 and 9. But research by a PhD student at the University of Sydney shows it's a long way from actually being compulsory, despite the government's decree. It shows, doesn't it, with all the recent cases of anti-Semitism amongst school children in Victoria and elsewhere. Indeed, the Jewish Board of Deputies of New South Wales reports that anti-Semitic cases in Sydney have almost doubled over the past 12 months. Again, as I wrote yesterday, while teaching the Holocaust isn't inoculation against anti-Semitism, it goes a long way to teaching future generations about vigilance and the lessons of history. So today, as we remember sacrifice in battles long gone now, let's also remember what we fought them for, and that the price of peace is eternal vigilance. A lesson for the voters of Britain, sure, but a lesson for all of us too, particularly on the left side of politics.